Alrighty, for what it's worth here, there's me in the hole back in 2009 at my first privy dig with pontiled bottles in it. That's me holding one of my first pontiled bottles out of this pit, and that was just the start. Unfortunately, I had to have a partner on this dig. And this is kind of the hoard that we came home with the first day. All dirty, sitting on my kitchen counter and whatnot. A couple of days later, this is my share of the finds. Quite a few pontiled guys here to point out. The Phoenix bitters I had tumbled and it looks great. What else was pontiled? Pontiled. These Godfrey's cordials cylinders were pontiled. The George, good Lord, come on, Jack. George, you know George. Carpenter. Fluid extracts or whatever. That's pontiled. Hall's balsam for the lungs was not, but it's just as crude as anything pontiled. The Groningen Durholt was pontiled. The Boschult and this Groningen Durholt were smooth base, I think. Berries trichophorus for the skin and hair, pontiled. I got a couple of those out of this dig, along with the vermifuge bottles. Those were all pontiled. These guys all were pontiled. These plain, not this guy, all the cylinders were, and so is this guy. I got a picture of the bases showing. And Dr. Jane's alterative was not pontiled, but the 84 Chestnut Street address was changed, I think, according to Digger Odell's book, in the late 1850s, so it was certainly pontiled era. And then this bad boy here is some sort of an apothecary jar from England. I got some close-up shots of that later on. That was pretty cool. Wolverhampton. Prepared at the laboratory of something Weaver and Company. Wolverhampton, established 1773. Yeah. So anyway. Close-ups of the pontiled cylinders and the bottles in the background. There's a real close-up. Mander Weaver and Company. And that thing came out pristine perfect, minus the lid. Somebody said they didn't think it likely had a lid, but I wouldn't know why they would have a rim for one. You know, I'm thinking it was probably a plain Jane lid, but who knows. And then the sodas that came out that I ended up with, that one on the far right, Fisher and Boschult, is supposedly only from 1863, a pretty rare bird. I ended up trading that one with Brandon Smith over there. Yeah, these guys are the unpontiled versions of what we found. Boo-hoo. And then a couple of the pontiled ones thrown in for good measure. These are all pontil era bottles, pre-Civil War. The two smooth bases were certainly pre-Civil War. Wasn't much in this hole that was much later. And then I got a bunch of close-ups of the Phoenix bitters before I got it tumbled. It looks like the day it was made now. Okay. Computer's not wanting to work again. Oh yeah, a little out of focus, but what the hell. You can see the pontil mark on the base. George Carpenter's. Apparently these aren't particularly rare. Nice kind of a icy blue aqua color. That's pretty close to the real color too. And the ever-present berries, trichophoracesis, for the skin and hair. And some do say instructions in the pamphlet on the back side. And some of the much later ones also have that embossing. So I suspect the ones without that are older. Even though these are pontiled, this one's pontiled. And then there's the smattering of unembossed pontiled stuff. I love the lean to that one rectangular medicine. And here's the bases of them coming up. Just to prove they're all open pontiled. I don't think I recall seeing anything that was improved or iron pontiled. Yeah, so there you have it. I do have a good number of these still in my collection, so I'll probably do an add-on with those, just because I don't have any real dig videos except for the one of me squinting at the blinding sun. Yeah, it was an interesting spot to dig because it was a vacant lot for all that I knew about it, but then I had just moved here a year ago. But when I probed out this hole, didn't realize that it had already been perused by the so-called professional archaeologists who deemed it not worthy of any historic significance or excavating. And we hit a gold mine. We hit this one right off the bat, and you know, we're all excited about that. We hit some later holes, and eventually it became what is now known as the Croc Center. It used to have a handful of old pre-Civil War houses on the property, and now it has a giant swimming pool and a 3-story place to go exercise. So there you have it. Well, alrighty, continuing where we left off with a more modern twist. The Wolverhampton crockery pharmacy thing is pretty wicked looking. I mean, it's got a unicorn and a lion apparently getting along. The lion has not eaten the unicorn, so you can't blame the lion for no unicorns. Anyway, hey, yeah, no other embossings. The hulls balsam for the lungs was one of my favorites. It's got no other embossings, and it's got a half circle key mold on it. Real funky, early, bubbly applied top with that lovely indented, clipped cornered panels on front and back. I actually used this as a comparative bottle to this broken one I dug up last year, called the Dr. Wright's Rocky Mountain Bitters, amber colored with the same clipped corners. I think these are from Cincinnati, if I'm not wrong, and I think Scoville was really big on these clipped cornered bottle molds. You would think somebody would have patented the mold, but I suppose that's kind of hard to get away with, like patenting a color. Best bottle out of the whole, the Phoenix Bitters. And the interesting story behind this, I mean, they're not worth a whole lot. You know, $100 on a good day, maybe a little more, unless they're olive or amber or olive amber, and you know, or the $2 size. This is the small $1 size. But what was funny was one of the local bottle hounds came along while we were deep in the hole, and the guy I was digging with, you know, he wanted to jump in the hole. This guy wanted to just jump in the hole and start digging, and he's like, "Oh yeah, go ahead." I'm like, "Hell no, it's my turn," you know. And guess what? The first bottle I pulled out was the Phoenix Bitters. This yahoo would have just come upon the dig after we'd been sweating for hours, jumped in the hole, dug out the best bottle, and been on his way, you know. And I'm like, that was a close call. You know, sometimes you gotta fight for your right to party. No, wait a minute, that's a different subject altogether. You gotta fight for your right in the hole. You know, it's like, you ain't giving my turn in the hole to this fool. Sorry. And here's another one of those oddball pontil guys, George W. Carpenter, Philadelphia. He had an interesting history. And what was this? Genuine Preparations, yeah. He did well in the business and was an early one, kind of like Dr. Jane's and a few others from Philly. And then the Berry's Trichophorus. This one doesn't have the in the pamphlet on the backside, but it's definitely an open pontiled. Probably older than the other one that does say, you know, blah blah in the pamphlet. Real common, but hey, I hadn't dug one until this hole. And then the ever-present soothing syrup. To this day, I've dug, you know, like maybe a dozen of these guys that are this old, you know. It's got a straight line hinge mold. Missed the pontil by about a week and a half. Everything about it screams pontil age, except for no pontil. It's got the rolled lip. You know, to this day I have still yet to dig up a Winslow's soothing syrup pontiled, you know. And then we just, these were popping out left and right. I think my digging companion got 2 or 3 of these. This one's kind of cool because you can see this fin of glass adhered to the seam line. It oozed out during the process. And I mean, that's sharp enough to cut you. I mean, I wouldn't want to get in a barroom brawl with a vermifuge bottle wielder. He's like, "Arr, arr, arr, matey." You end up with a few whiskers chopped off of that thing. Anyway, These are all the same. Farn stock, BA farn stock. This one's just a regular farn stock. There were copycats too, or fakes. BA, I think was the real deal. I think FA farn stock was the bullshit guy who capitalized on their success. It was real common. And then Robert Seller's vermifuge. This one was smooth base, but boy oh boy, you know, those snake-like S's from Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, I'm sorry. I'll bet you that's where this was from. Seems like the Hostetter's and a few other bottles that were minted in Pittsburgh have these snaky serpentine S's that some of them look like they'll fall on their faces. Anyway, smooth base, and you know, another worm destroyer medicine. So there you have it, my very first pontil dig, and it exceeded all my preconceived expectations. Yeah. If every hole was like this, boy oh boy. Alrighty. Today, this is kind of a follow-up on my first pontil pit. And technically this was my first pontil bottle I ever dug up. But it wasn't from a pontil pit. It actually came from a wall dump, where it looked like they had just dumped along a wall. And it was hard to tell which side of the wall it came from. It was fairly shallow and it was underneath the wall, so it could have been on one side of the property line or the other. That being said, one side of the property line was a parking lot when I dug up the bottles, and the other side was the home to a very iconic character in a very famous book of Mark Twain. That's about as close as I'm going to touch that one. And could have been drank by that character, the person who was used for the character. Anyway, this one is about the same vintage, came out right next to this one, but this one has a smooth base, and this one has a iron pontil base. Both are embossed Quincy, Illinois, and grown in Durholt. And Durholt is misspelled on the bottle. It should be, oh, I can't remember now. Doggone it. It's embossed with a T or a D, and it's the other way around. Hang on a second. There's the bases, and I still have the one on the right. I'll bring that one up in a moment. Durhold should be a T. So not only was it pontiled, but it was also misspelled. This one was Preston from Boston. Preston and Boston one side and Boston on the other. Open pontil. And this one is like a 12-sided perfume or possible medicine with a refired pontil. So basically everything out of this wall dump was pontiled. And as you can see, the two smaller bottles were seriously damaged, and partly why I no longer have them. And this was from where they were found, opposite this side of the property. You can see a open cistern here, and they were doing some major renovations to the property, dating back, I believe, to the 1830s. this was getting kind of closer to where the bottles were found. I think they were actually on the other side of that barrier. I'm trying to remember. It's been 15 years ago. But anyway, yeah, they were doing some serious renovating. And there's a couple, this little area right in here, I thought was very curious. You know, it doesn't look like any kind of a privy wall that I'm familiar with. The rocks are very jagged and jumbled, almost like they had a ravine of some sort, and they just shoved a bunch of rubble in there with a few bricks kind of hanging off to the side there. That area looked a little interesting back in there. But I never did get to, you know, for obvious reasons, I didn't get to explore any of that. A close-up of that interesting edge there. And yeah, I would have liked to have seen what came out of that cistern. That would have been interesting, huh? But there wasn't a scrap of glass down there. And I think that's the end of my little slideshow. But anyway, I wanted to throw this in because this was technically my first pontil dig where everything came out pontiled. Just not a whole heck of a lot of it. And here we are, finishing up that short little video with the only remainder in my collection. I actually traded off the smooth based one some time ago. This one I hung on to for obvious reasons. You know, the first iron pontil bottle I ever dug up, and it's misspelled. And also I discovered in later years that they actually had a satellite factory in Hannibal before the Civil War, and I suspect that they just used the same bottles from the same mold, you know, called over for a wagon load when they needed them from their home factory in Quincy, Illinois, over the river. I've never seen one from this company with Hannibal Mo on it. They're all from Quincy, Illinois, and yet I've dug more of these in Hannibal than I've ever dug in Quincy. But then again, I've dug more holes in Hannibal than I have in Quincy too, so that could have something to do with it. But I suspect that that's what was going on, that a lot of these came from the Hannibal factory but were still embossed Quincy. And probably not too unusual with bordering towns across a state line and a river, you know. Anyway, yeah, an iconic bottle in my collection that's more famous for its history than I am. Well, actually most of my bottles are. What am I saying? This one has more potential history than probably any other bottle that I have. Yeah, and you could have probably heard me holler across the river when I first dug this up and realized my first iron pontiled soda bottle, or any kind of bottle. So there you have it. That's the story. So I'm sticking to it. Alrighty, this video was taken almost 10 years ago to the day. About a month shy of 10 years ago. And I don't look a day older today. Ha ha ha, yeah. Anyway, that's me holding a pontiled Ayers bottle. A cherry pectoral, I believe. And You can see the lovely fall colors of the poison ivy behind me. Yeah. A shallow pit behind a friend of mine's demo house. Well, actually, he was gutting it. It's now a fancy B&B. Or a Airbnb, I should say. There's kind of the pile of stuff that I was pulling out. A very shallow brick liner. For Hannibal, that was unusual. And a number that I think that was pontiled. You know, some plateware, the ever-present Vaseline jars, indicating it may have been more than one woman in the house for reasons we won't get into. And, you know, slick medicines. Most of it was fairly typical. I only got a couple of good take-home bottles. There were a few criers like cathedral pickles, and I'm sure I got some more pictures of that coming up. Oh yeah, and of course a brick liner usually most likely held a brick outhouse. So guess where all the bricks went when they tore down the brick outhouse? In the hole. Very neat little privy hole, and I just wish it had gone down another 5 feet with no end in sight. Oh yeah, I forgot about the broken scroll flask. That was a crier. Look at the color of that pickle. I'm telling you, if that doesn't get your juices flowing, nothing will. And one of the first McLean's strengthening cordials I dug up, and I swear, I've never dug up a intact pontiled one, but the smooth base ones from that era, I swear, are cruder than the pontiled versions. A Davis painkiller, and a couple of unembossed puffs, and that looks like a Crawley Town Mason to my eye. And a Dr. Bull's extract of sarsaparilla. I've dug a dozen at least, if not more. Pontiled, they never come out whole. I mean, they're always crushed. Very sad state of affairs for me. One of these days. Prepared by Dr. Easterly, St. Louis. Has a nice iron pontil on it, and you know, my joking run of digging St. Louis bottles is, if it ain't pontiled, it ain't worth nothing, you know. Well, this one's pontiled, and it still ain't worth nothing. Well, not very accurate there. I've seen them list for $200 and they don't sell, you know. I think it's listed for that in Johnny's book. I can't remember, but I don't know. I wouldn't want to sell it anyway, you know. I'm a digger. I'm not a money digger, you know. Not into it for the money. Though I do think it's foolish not to know what your bottles are worth, or could be worth, you know. So anyway, onward and forward. And that, to my eye, looks like a historic flask. And another piece to another cathedral pickle. I mean, if everything had come out intact, that would have been quite the haul. There's the base of that. And the two pontiled guys, the Ayers and the Easterly, came out perfect. I was real excited till I clunked into the bottom of the pit, and I'm like, really? That's all she wrote? But, you know, you gotta take what the bottle goddess doles out and be happy with it. Or, yeah, there's my extract of sarsaparilla. Yeah. What a sweet bottle, you know. With a small A at the end. They had to squeeze that A in there, and I have no idea why they got a period after extract. You know. These guys got goofy with their molds, you know. And then of course the green cathedral pickle. McLean strengthening cordial. I had a couple of these pro-tumbled, and they just look spectacular. They sparkle, and they look like they're in motion almost, you know, with the waves and the whittle and the crudeness to them. And that always breaks my heart to see something like that being headless. So anyway, a very quick pit to dig. Took next to no time at all to dig down 4 feet, I think. I think that's when it bottomed out. And it seems like the best ones are always the most shallow for some reason. I don't get it. But there you have it. Well, alrighty. Here's the 2 aforementioned bottles from the video. The Ayers is, well, they're both in perfect condition as far as condition goes, but the Ayers has an open pontil and some crud in the glass, and fortunately it's not spider webbed at all or anything. Funky, obviously applied top. You know, not a valuable bottle, but I love it. I love these indented panels on them. I love the pontil on it. You know, what's not to like? This one, yeah, it's aqua, but it's like this deep ocean aqua color, you know, almost a slight greenish aqua. Remnants of a iron pontil. Johnny's book has it listed for $75 to $100. No thanks, I think I'll hang on to it. You know what I mean? I mean, we diggers work so damn hard for a decent bottle, and then when we find one and it's not worth, you know, a job flipping burgers for the same amount of time that we spent digging, yeah, that gets kind of discouraging. But I try not to go there. Try as I might, I can't help it sometimes. Especially when I'm still achy and sore muscled from digging, and I come home, look it up in the book, and I'm like, really? That's it? You know, so I can see why somebody would list one for $200. I wouldn't take less for it. And I may not take more for it. Yeah, that's just how I am. It's like, nah, you know what? Money comes a lot easier than these bottles do. Even the common ones, you know. They're getting harder to find, folks. So if you're buying bottles, you ought to buy them now, because I always used to think, geez, you know, any day somebody could dig up 100 of these things, and it doesn't seem to be likely so much. So there you have it. The 2 out of that brick liner, shallow brick liner from at least the 1850s. That property shows up on an 1854 map, so I know it went back that far. Which is what I'm guessing these bottles are, mid-1850s. And that green pickle, oh my gosh. I would have given my mother's right arm for that. I wouldn't give mine, then I couldn't dig bottles anymore, you know. What the hell's the matter with me?